What's up guys, Coach Highway from GameLeap here, and in this video today, I'll be covering one helpful tip for every single hero across all of Overwatch 2. Before we get started, our website launches this month, and you can get half off by pre-ordering your membership. It'll have tons of far more complex and in-depth guides guaranteed to help you improve your game. Come check it out by following the link right here. Okay, we're going to do this one role at a time, and alphabetically, starting with the tank role. First on the tank list, we have D.Va. D.Va's head hitbox is on the front of her model, and unlike most head hitboxes, there is actually not a way to headshot her when she isn't looking right at you. You can use this to your advantage when you're closing distance on enemy DPSs. Just turn around and walk backwards and then they can't headshot you anymore. Next up is Doomfist. Doom is a super movement oriented hero. You can use a ton of slopes and various props on different maps in order to get some weird punch directions and movement. Look up a custom game called Doomfist Parkour to get some practice using various props and learn the basics of the Doom rollout tech. Next on the list is Junker Queen. Be sure to not use your shout until you're ready to commit to fighting or to try to save a teammate in a desperate situation. The cooldown is extremely long, so you need to make sure you don't waste it. If you take a little damage before you use it, you can get healed while the enemy damages your shout health, which increases your effective HP. Next up is Orisa. If you have an enemy team close to the edge of the map, you can use your ultimate to pull them off of the map as you fall in. It's not always good to go for, but there are a lot of maps you can get a surprise 2 to 3 picks in a fun, creative way. Next up is Reinhardt. When going up against an enemy Reinhardt, pay attention for their fire strike animation to land easy shatters if you have a quick reaction time. This also goes for vice versa. If you think they have earth shatter, don't use your fire strike and try to start and stop your swings before shielding again to try and bait out their earth shatter. Next up we have Roadhog. This one isn't exactly a tip for Roadhog, but tank in general. Since teams like to spam spawn doors when they open at the beginning of a round, you can go Roadhog to take the damage and then use his self-heal to gain ult charge. Afterwards, you can switch to a different tank and the ult charge will transfer over thanks to the new OW2 changes. You can use this trick to get an early edge on Graviton Surge, for example. Next up is Sigma. Using Sigma's rocks, you can actually give yourself a very small jump boost, which can help you get onto various elevated points on different maps and let you hold or push some interesting spots. Play around in custom games and look up videos for a bunch of different Sigma rock spots. Next we have Winston. Pretty similar to the D.Va trick, you can turn around when you're jumping in the air after a target to avoid taking headshot damage when you are most vulnerable. And for the final tank on the list, we have Wrecking Ball. When using your ultimate, try to swing up into the air a little bit, use your ult, and then slam before you land. This will draw enemies a bit towards the center and make them far more likely to get stuck in your minefield. Okay, and that's the tanks out of the way. Let's now move on to the largest section of the cast, the DPS. If you've enjoyed the video up to this point, please like and subscribe for more helpful Overwatch tips and guides. Thank you all so much for the support. Okay, first up on the DPS line, we have Ashe. Avoid using your dynamite to deal spam damage that has no chance of follow-up when you already have your ultimate. Lots of Ashe players instinctively use their dynamite on big groups of enemies when they're still unlikely to die, and doing so will just end up feeding the enemy support some ult charge. This is good to do when you don't have Bob, but when you do, you're actually giving the other team an advantage. If there's a chance that there is some follow-up to come, then go ahead and go for it. Or if you're taking a 1v1 with somebody, then also you can go for it then. But try to avoid throwing your dynamite into big clusters of people with no real gain. Next up on the DPS line is Bastion. Bastion's grenades knock back players hit by it. Use your grenade on the floor directly below you and jump to propel yourself up to high grounds and give Bastion a much needed boost in mobility. Next is Cassidy. High Noon can be a deadly ultimate if only you weren't so darn slow. Start coordinating with Lucio more in order to combine Speed Amp plus High Noon to chase enemies around corners. He's surprisingly fast when you do this and will give you a better chance of catching fleeing enemies. Next up is Echo. When fighting enemy hit scans, such as Cassidy or Soldier, it's better for you to get close and above them in order to make yourself harder to hit. Try to avoid flying around at mid-range where it's an easy shot for the enemy and walk with your team and then boost when you get closer to them. Next we have the fan favorite Genji. Holding your secondary fire button while deflecting will allow your shot to go off the second that your deflect animation ends. You can use this to make the delay between your deflect and your damage as thin as possible. This is obviously great when you're in a duel because it gives the enemy as little counterplay as possible. Next up is Genji's brother Hanzo. When you use dragons, you can actually charge another full arrow during the animation. This lets you be ready in the event someone pushes you while you're in the middle of ulting. After you start casting your dragons, simply start holding your primary fire and watch afterwards as your arrow is ready to be fired for max damage. Next we have Junkrat. If you place a mine on the floor near you, you can recharge a second mine with your first one active. This lets you go for double mine jumps and still have a mine left over, allowing you to fly in from unsuspecting heights, get up to really high spots while still having an important cooldown, or to even chase after enemy phares way up into the sky to go for a surprise pick on her. That last one can be pretty hard to get though, but don't let that stop you from trying. Next up is Mei. You can use your wall to split off targets from defensive ultimates, such as Sound Barrier or Transcendence in many circumstances. For example, if you use your ultimate and freeze 2 targets in it, but you see the enemy Zen using Transcendence, consider using your wall to guarantee at least one pick by separating them from the Zen, and then going for whoever the Zen doesn't try to save. Next is Pharah. Shooting the floor with a rocket at the same time you pressed your upward boost will nearly double the height you get from it. This is insanely helpful for maps that have a really high ceiling to them, such as Ilios. Just watch out for enemy hit scans. Speaking of, our next hero is Soldier 76. As Soldier, you can use your heal pad right before you ult in order to combine the animations. Press your heal pad button, and as quickly after as you can, press your ult button. Note that it does not need to be super exact, so just don't overthink it. Your heal pad will fall under you as though you completed the entire animation, but you'll have also used your visor at the same time. This can save you valuable seconds in your ultimate to avoid losing time to animations and instead let you focus on dealing damage. Next up we have Sojourn. Genji is a very annoying hero to deal with. When he tries to fight you, use your disruptor directly on your feet to give you a space to work around and create some distance and avoid having him deflected at you. Next on the list is Sombra. Keep in mind your translocator gives you a moment of invulnerability and clears effects off of you. If you're on fire or you're taking some kind of damage over time or have anti-grenade on you, quickly toss and then immediately teleport to your translocator to potentially save your life. Next up is Symmetra. You can use your teleporter to teleport teammates out of Zarya's graviton, even if you yourself are in it. This is an extremely good counter to grab, especially when your team has no defensive ultimates. Next on our list is Torbjorn. You can use your turret to block a fair bit of your hitbox in a lot of situations, causing it to not only help you with damage, but also provide a sort of impromptu shield. Next up is Tracer. Tracer can use her blinks to parkour up to high grounds, which can save her a ton of time on routes. Check out some videos on Tracer rollouts and experiment in your own time in custom games to find little props and ramps you can blink off of or up against as shortcuts. The final DPS on our list is Widowmaker. You can use your Venom Mine on the side of a wall to protect your head from one headshot. This can be extremely helpful when fighting enemy Widowmakers, just make sure you can actually see past it. It may take some experimenting, but once you get used to it, you can catch a lot of Widows off guard. That's all for the DPS roster. Let's move right on into the support one. The first tip on the support list is Ana. My favorite Ana tip is to use your ultimate charge meter at mid to long range in order to help you have an easier time finding nade lineups. This trick is honestly OP as it drastically cuts down the time you need to spend finding perfect spots and lineups in custom games. Simply scope in at mid range, put your target in your ultimate circle, and throw your nade for an easy, consistent lineup at your nade location. Baptiste is up next, and try to always put your lamp or your immortality field around a corner to make it more difficult to break without an enemy overextending. This allows it to stay up for far more of its duration than it would if it was just out in the open. Brigitte is up next, and keep in mind your whip shot does 70 points of damage, whereas your primary fire only does 35. When you're fighting and trying to finish off an enemy, use your rocket flail when they are down to a little under 3 bars of health in order to finish them off quickly. Next we have Kiriko. On Kiriko, when the enemy team is a dive comp, try to kite away from where your team is going. That way you can use your teleport to create a ton of distance between your team and the enemy divers by baiting people to chase you and then abruptly getting away from them. The next support on our list is Lucio. Try not to use your sound barrier while you're very high up in the air. If you know your team is going to need it, use it close to the ground as that will reduce the time it takes for you to land and thus deliver the barrier. It also reduces your chances of getting killed while you're locked in the sound barrier animation. The next tip is on Mercy. When you Guardian Angel to a target, if you press your backwards directional and jump, you can do a backwards Guardian Angel, shooting you back in the direction that you came. This can be an incredibly effective juking tool, especially for enemies like Genji who have to use their dash to try to chase you in the first place. Next up on our list is Moira. Try to always throw out an orb right before you ult to combine for either a big boost in damage or in burst healing. A lot of Moiras forget to, and it's incredibly useful as the cooldown will tick down even while you're ulting, and you'll be unable to use an orb anyway. The final character on our list is Zenyatta. When you have trance and you need to make sure you land it against the enemy ultimates, try to hide and stay just a bit separate from your team. This will let you avoid getting suddenly bursted down or have your ultimate forced out early. You can also use props to break LOS of your team when you're waiting for something like EMP. This will force the Sombra to pick between either landing her EMP on you or landing her EMP on the team because you have the prop to break LOS. Just be sure that you don't go too far away, because if you do, you might not be able to make it back to your team when you actually use your trance. They may end up dying game before you're there. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed this little trick and tips list. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and as always, I appreciate you all. Take care and peace.